The Copper Scroll Treasure. In 1952, high in the Judean desert near Qumran, archaeologists pried open a brittle jar and pulled from it a scroll unlike any other. Unlike the other Dead Sea Scrolls, parchments filled with biblical passages, hymns, and apocalyptic visions, this one was hammered into sheets of thin copper. The letters had been chiselled rather than inked, as though its authors intended it to endure longer than ordinary manuscripts. What it contained was startling. A list of hidden treasures, hundreds of deposits of gold, silver, and sacred vessels buried in various locations across Judea. The inventory reads less like scripture and more like a treasure map. One passage describes a deposit in the valley of Achor, under the steps, 40 cubits deep, 40 talents of silver. Another speaks of vast troves stored beneath aqueducts and inside cisterns. If taken literally, the hoard would amount to tons of precious metals, enough wealth to finance kingdoms, perhaps the lost treasures of the Jerusalem temple itself. Mainstream scholars have long debated whether the Copper Scroll reflects reality or imagination. Some argue it may describe temple treasures hidden from the Romans before Jerusalem's fall in 70 CE. Others point out its strange style, lacking religious commentary, written instead in the blunt tone of an accountant's ledger. Unlike myths of Atlantis or El Dorado, this document names specific places and measurements. Yet for all its detail, no one has ever recovered the riches it describes. Quirky theories abound. Fringe writers suggest the scroll encodes secret knowledge, perhaps locations of underground vaults leading to forgotten archives. A few even tie it to tales of the Ark of the Covenant, claiming the artifacts of Solomon's temple were spirited away and disguised in the scroll's obscure directions. In the 20th century, explorers with metal detec, tors and shovels scoured the Judean hillsides, occasionally arrested for digging on forbidden ground. Each time, the earth gave up only dust and disappointment. Part of the mystery lies in the Copper Scroll's damaged state. Certain words are corroded, entire lines lost to verdigris. Scholars still debate whether its directions point to real locations we can identify today, or whether the landscape itself has shifted too much in 2,000 years. Was the Valley of Achor the same ravine marked on modern maps? Were the cisterns it names destroyed by earthquakes or buried under centuries of sediment? What lingers is the haunting possibility that immense caches of gold and silver remain hidden, awaiting discovery beneath Israel's hills. Unlike many ancient legends, this one rests on a tangible artifact, a copper sheet you can see in a museum, letters etched by human hands. And yet, like so many riddles from antiquity, it holds its secrets close, reminding us that even when history whispers in precise detail, we may never quite understand what it is saying. The Ubide lizardmen. In the hot Mesopotamian sun, around 7,000 years ago, a culture known today as the Ubide flourished along the marshes of what would later become Sumer. They built some of the first villages with large public buildings, cultivated grain in organised fields, and carved small figurines that still baffle us today. These statuettes, dug from the ancient soil of southern Iraq, often depict slim-bodied figures with elongated heads, wide, almond-shaped eyes, and, most curious of all, features resembling reptiles. Some cradle infants in their arms. Others wear headdresses or hold staffs, symbols of authority or ritual. To look at them is to feel that you've stumbled upon something both deeply human and eerily alien. The mainstream fact is clear. Archaeologists agree the Ubide culture, dating roughly from 5000 to 4000 BCE, played a crucial role in laying the foundations for Mesopotamian civilization. Their settlements, such as Tel al-Ubaid near predate the grandeur of Sumer by centuries. The figurines are just one part of the story, a reflection perhaps of their spiritual world. Yet these reptilian faces stand apart from ordinary fertility figures of other cultures. Quirky tidbits swirl around them. Some fringe enthusiasts claim the statuettes depict a race of lizard people who once lived among humans, pointing to their strangely naturalistic detail as evidence. Internet forums link them to modern conspiracy myths about reptilian overlords, stretching a thread from ancient marsh dwellers to 21st century urban legends. Others propose the figures might represent shamans wearing lizard masks during ritual ceremonies, or gods imagined in non-human form. Still, scholars debate the purpose of these objects. Were they charms, offerings to household shrines, or did they embody myths long lost to us? Unlike Egyptian or Sumerian gods, no writ, and mythology from the Ubide survives to identify them. Without texts, interpretation is a game of educated guesswork. Some archaeologists argue they may simply be stylized human figures, the reptilian features nothing more than artistic convention. Yet, the undeniable strangeness keeps curiosity alive. When we stand before these small, weathered statues in museum cases, we sense both connection and distance. Their eyes, wide and unblinking, look out across millennia as if keeping a secret. We can imagine an Ubide potter pressing clay into shape, carefully etching scales onto the body, intending a meaning we can no longer grasp. Were these figures protectors, tellers of myths, or perhaps, as some dreamers suggest, echoes of encounters with something beyond ordinary human experience? Like the Copper Scroll's elusive treasure, the Ubide lizardmen remind us how fragile the line is between archaeology and imagination. Solid clay rests in our hands, yet its story remains just beyond reach, provoking us to wonder whether our ancestors knew a world richer, stranger, and far less explainable than we like to believe. The Phaistos disc. In the summer of 1908, Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier was excavating at the Minoan palace of Phaistos on Crete when his spade struck something unusual. He unearthed a small clay disc about 6 inches across, imprinted on both sides with a spiral of stamped symbols. Each sign was carefully pressed into the wet clay using some form of movable stamps, an ancient innovation centuries ahead of Gutenberg's printing press. Over 200 distinct impressions fill its surface: human figures, animals, tools, flowers, even abstract shapes. The result is a riddle in terracotta that still resists solution. The mainstream fact is straightforward. The disc dates to the 2nd millennium BCE, placing it within the Minoan era, the same culture responsible for the labyrinthine palace at Knossos. But while we can read Linear B, the script of Mycenaean Greece, and recognize traces of Linear A, the language of the Minoans, the symbols on the Phaistos disc belong to no known system. Its spiral arrangement is unlike anything else in Mediterranean archaeology. Quirky theories quickly grew around it. Some fringe researchers suggest it is a hymn or magical chant, its spiral meant to be read aloud as one continuous incantation. Others argue it could be a board game, a calendar, or even a star map. A few have gone further, claiming it encodes a lost Atlantean tongue, or that it was left by visitors from another world. The spiral, after all, carries a powerful symbolism in many cultures, from snail shells to galaxies. Scholars still debate the very basics: what language it represents, whether it is syllabic, alphabetic, or pictographic, and even whether it is authentic. A handful of skeptics have whispered that it might be a forgery planted by a 19th century adventurer, though most specialists reject this, noting the disc's discovery under controlled excavation. What makes the puzzle so thorny is its isolation. No other artifact bears the same script, no second disc has ever been found. Without parallels, decipherment is nearly impossible. To picture its creation is to imagine a Minoan artisan seated with a set of carved stamps, carefully pressing each tiny figure into clay, spiralling inward toward the centre. Was it a scribe recording sacred words for posterity? A priest crafting a ritual object never meant to be read by human eyes? Or was it, as some muse, a child's game token, preserved by accident. The Phaistos disc endures as a reminder of how much can slip from memory. A single object, perfectly preserved, can become an orphaned language, severed from the voices that once gave it meaning, like the lizard-faced figurines of the Ubide or the hidden treasures of the copper scroll. It stands at the edge of comprehension, close enough to touch, yet forever beyond translation. The Sumerian king list. In the dust of Mesopotamia, carved into clay tablets, lies a document that reads less like sober history and more like epic fantasy. Known today as the Sumerian king list, it catalogues rulers of ancient city-states, stretching back thousands of years before the dawn of writing itself. It begins with a phrase that still sends a shiver down the spine. After kingship descended from heaven, kingship was in Eridu. The mainstream fact is that the king list is real. Several copies have been found, the earliest dating from around 2100 BCE. These tablets were not scattered myths, but carefully inscribed documents, listing rulers, their cities, and the lengths of their reigns. At first glance, it seems like an ordinary royal chronicle, but then the numbers grow strange. Some kings are said to have ruled for centuries, even millennia. One, Alalim of Eridu, supposedly reigned for 28,800 years. Another, Alalgar, followed with 36,000. These figures stagger the imagination, dwarfing even the longest reigns in Egyptian or Chinese tradition. Quirky theories thrive in such fertile soil. Some fringe writers claim the king list preserves the memory of a time when gods walked among humans, equating the absurdly long reigns with immortal beings or alien visitors. Others read it as a symbolic calendar, where the massive numbers encode astronomical cycles rather than literal years. In the 20th century, a handful of scholars even entertained the possibility that it might record echoes of a pre-flood civilization, a lost epoch remembered in later myths. Yet, scholars still debate the document's purpose. Was it propaganda, written to unify Sumerian city-states by inventing a shared past? Or was it, in some sense, a blend of history and myth, with genuine kings interspersed among legendary rulers? Indeed, the list eventually narrows to more believable reigns, tens of years rather than thousands, particularly after the Great Flood narrative that divides the text. Kings like Gilgamesh of Uruk, known from epic poetry, appear here with reign lengths that, while exaggerated, still suggest human lifespans. To read the king list aloud is to hear echoes of both scripture and folklore. One can imagine a Sumerian scribe reciting it in a temple hall, audiences nodding solemnly as names of impossibly ancient kings rolled by, linking their present rulers to a divine lineage stretching back to the dawn of time. Whether myth, math, or memory, the document blurs the lines between fact and imagination in a way that still unsettles us. Like the Phaistos disc's spiral of unreadable signs, the king list remains a text that refuses to sit neatly in its box. Is it a ledger of real rulers, inflated for prestige? Or is it a bridge to something more mysterious? A story the ancients believed but we can only half grasp. The clay tablets endure, their wedge-shaped cuneiform marks steady and clear, while the meaning slips tantalizing just out of reach. The Cochno stone. On a quiet hillside near Glasgow, Scotland, an immense rock once lay exposed to the sky. Locals called it the Cochno stone. Measuring more than 40 feet across, its surface is covered in swirling, interconnected carvings, spirals, rings, channels, and mysterious cup marks pecked into the stone thousands of years ago. To stand upon it in its original state was to look down at what seemed like an ancient cosmic map, a galaxy sprawled across the Earth itself. The mainstream fact is clear: the Cochno stone is real, discovered in 1887 by the Reverend James Harvey. Archaeologists generally date its carvings to the Neolithic or Bronze Age, perhaps around 3000 BCE. Such symbols, known as cup and ring marks, are scattered across Britain and Europe, but rarely on such a monumental scale. The Cochno stone is often described as the single finest example of prehistoric rock art in Britain, yet its meaning remains utterly obscure. Quirky theories have clustered around it for over a century. Some see in its spirals a representation of the sun, the moon, and the movement of the stars. Others propose that it might be a sacred map of the landscape, perhaps directions to burial sites or ritual centres. Fringe writers have claimed it is nothing less than a chart of the heavens, laid down by an ancient people with astronomical knowledge far beyond their time. A few even whisper that the designs encode portals to other realms, or messages from beings not of this earth. Scholars still debate the practical details. Were the carvings filled with water, reflecting torchlight during night rituals? Did they mark boundaries between communities, or guide worshippers towards seasonal festivals? With no written record, the Cochno stone refuses to explain itself, and so, despite its vastness and its survival into the modern era, we remain no closer to understanding it than the reeve wren who first brushed away the soil in the 19th century. The story takes a further twist. In 1965, authorities decided the Cochno stone was too vulnerable to vandalism and graffiti. In an extraordinary move, they covered the entire monument with several feet of soil and grass, deliberately burying it to protect it from modern hands. For decades, its secrets lay hidden once more. Only in 2016 did archaeologists briefly re-expose the surface, scanning it in 3 dimensions before returning it to its protective shroud of earth. To imagine the original builders is to picture a group of prehistoric carvers, stone tools in hand, pecking ring after ring into the great rock, spiralling outward in rhythms we cannot follow. Was it art, a calendar, a story carved into earth instead of parchment? Like the long reigns of Sumer's ancient kings or the indecipherable Phaistos disc, the Cochno stone remains a testament to how much our ancestors knew, and how little of it they explained to us. The Rongorongo script. Far out in the Pacific Ocean lies Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island, a place famous for its towering moai statues gazing across the horizon. Yet alongside those stone sentinels exists a quieter, less visible mystery, the enigmatic script known as Rongorongo. Carved into wooden tablets, staffs, and even ornaments, these glyphs form intricate lines of abstract symbols, humans, birds, fish, crescents, and geometric forms, all flowing in a peculiar reverse pattern, read in alternating directions known as boustrafedon, like the plough of an ox moving back and forth across a field. The mainstream fact is this: Rongorongo is one of the few known instances where a culture appears to have independently invented writing. The first European reports of the script came in the 19th century after missionaries arrived on Rapa Nui. But by then, colonization, disease, and slavery had devastated the island's population. Whatever knowledge the glyphs once carried, ritual chants, genealogies, laws, or calendars, was already slipping away. Today, fewer than 30 genuine Rongorongo artifacts survive, scattered across museums worldwide. Quirky stories have grown around the script. Some suggest it may encode astronomical cycles, tracking the phases of the moon and the movement of the stars. Others claim it preserves oral traditions of the island's great voyages, a record of how the Polynesians navigated by the night sky. Fringe enthusiasts push further still, imagining that Rongorongo contains secret histories or even contact with distant civilizations across the seas. Because the tablet's surfaces sometimes appear charred, a few even propose they were used in rituals involving fire and smoke, messages only visible in certain conditions. Scholars still debate the script's status. Some argue it may not be a fully developed writing system at all, but rather a proto-writing, symbolic rather than phonetic. Others insist the repetition and order of signs point to genuine linguistic structure. Despite decades of study, no one has cracked its code. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, which offered a bilingual key to Egyptian hieroglyphs, Rongorongo stands alone, its language extinct, its readers long gone. To imagine its use is to conjure a scene of elders seated in a circle, passing a tablet hand to hand, chanting as fingers trace the carved symbols. The grooves still bear the polish of repeated touch, as though each line carried weight beyond the visible. Did these marks record prayers, contracts, or did they bind the island's oral traditions to wood in an attempt to preserve memory as the old ways faded? Like the Cochno stone spirals in Scotland or the lost tongues of the Indus Valley, Rongorongo reminds us how fragile writing can be. In a single generation, the knowledge of how to read it vanished. What remains are mute wooden boards, silent yet insistent, pressing us to consider how much of the human story is written not in what we can decipher, but in what we can no longer understand. The skulls of Malta. Deep beneath the sunlit streets of Malta lies the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, a vast underground necropolis carved into limestone over 5,000 years ago. Its chambers wind through 3 levels, with smooth walls, red ochre spirals, and chambers that echo with eerie acoustic resonance. In the early 20th century, during excavations of this subterranean labyrinth, archaeologists uncovered human remains, among them skulls that seemed to defy ordinary anatomy. The mainstream fact is undeniable. The Hypogeum, dating to around 4000 BCE, is one of the most extraordinary prehistoric sites in the Mediterranean, and excavators did recover hundreds of skeletons. Some of the skulls, however, reportedly displayed elongated craniums, unusual cranial cavities, or lacking the typical joint line known as the sagittal suture. Photographs taken in the 1920s show long, tapering skulls that sparked immediate fascination. Quirky tales grew quickly. Fringe writers proclaimed these were relics of a lost race, giants, priestly elites, or even beings not of this earth. Some connected them to the legends of the Nephilim in biblical lore, or to Atlantis, imagining Malta as a gateway to forgotten civilizations. In later decades, whispers suggested that many of the skulls vanished mysteriously, spirited away into museum basements, or destroyed without explanation. One persistent rumour claims a set of particularly unusual skulls was transferred to the National Museum in Valletta, only to disappear from official records. Yet scholars still debate the truth. Some argue the anomalies were the result of natural pathologies, or simple misinterpretation of fragmentary remains. Others point out that early excavation methods were not always rigorous, and records were often inconsistent. The absence of surviving skulls in the main museum collections only deepens suspicion. Were they stirred? Buried misplaced, or deliberately concealed? Without the physical evidence, the question hangs unanswered. The Hypogeum itself adds to the mystique. Certain chambers amplify sound in strange ways. Low voices can vibrate through the stone like a chant echoing from another world. Standing within those underground halls, it is easy to imagine ceremonies where priests in masks invoked spirits, perhaps holding aloft the elongated skulls of ancestors, symbols of power and mystery. Today, when visitors descend into the Hypogeum, they walk past reconstructed displays of the ordinary skeletons that remain. But the stories of the missing skulls linger like shadows. Did Malta's ancient builders truly possess different physiologies, or were the finds exaggerated by early reports hungry for sensation? Like Rongorongo's unreadable lines or the Cochno stone spirals, the truth is suspended in the gap between archaeology and legend. The skulls of Malta remain both artifact and absence, objects that once existed yet now hover as rumour, amplifying our sense that beneath the Mediterranean sun lies a darker, stranger past than history books allow. The Longyou Caves. In 1992, in the rural Zhejiang province of China, a group of villagers set out to drain a pond that had long seemed bottomless. They pumped water for days until, to their astonishment, the pond revealed not a natural depression, but the vaulted ceiling of a vast man-made cavern. As they explored further, they realized it was only one of many. Over the years, at least 36 colossal chambers have been identified in what are now known as the Longyou Caves. Together, they form one of the largest underground complexes ever discovered, yet no historical record mentions their construction. The mainstream fact is staggering. Each cave, cut directly into solid sandstone, features towering ceilings up to 30 meters high, with walls etched in a consistent pattern of diagonal chisel marks that ripple across the stone like waves. Archaeologists estimate that millions of cubic feet of rock were removed to create these spaces, all without iron tools or advanced machinery, sometime before 200 BCE. The feat rivals the greatest works of engineering in the ancient world, yet the caves appear in no dynastic chronicle, no inscription, no oral tale. Quirky theories soon took root. Some claim the caves were secret military bases, hidden storehouses for imperial armies. Others believe they were ceremonial chambers, sanctuaries for lost religions, or even meeting halls for contact with celestial beings. More imaginative voices whisper of underground cities, complete with waterways, carved to shelter an ancient people from catastrophe, perhaps floods, earthquakes, or cosmic events. A few point to the uniformity of the chisel patterns, wondering if they had some acoustic or symbolic meaning, rather than being mere decoration. Scholars still debate the basics. Who commissioned the work? How many labourers would have been needed? And why did no dynasty boast of such an achievement? Why are the caves empty, with no relics, pottery, or inscriptions left behind? Even radiocarbon testing of sediments provides only broad estimates, leaving their precise age elusive. The mystery deepens with the silence of history itself. China's meticulous records span millennia, yet they say nothing about these vast underground palaces. To stand inside the Longyou Caves is to feel both awe and disquiet. The walls rise like cathedral columns, their textured surfaces glowing in lamplight. Pools of still water reflect the scale of the chambers, amplifying their quiet. One can imagine workers with bronze chisels, torches flickering, methodically carving layer after layer in perfect unison. Were they following the orders of a forgotten emperor, or the vision of a community determined to leave behind something incomprehensibly grand? Like the missing skulls of Malta or the unreadable Rongorongo tablets, the Longyou Caves remain a riddle carved into stone. Solid, immense, undeniably real, yet their silence is louder than words, reminding us that sometimes the greatest monuments are not those that tell a story, but those that refuse to tell one at all. The Roman dodecahedra. Scattered across Europe, from Britain to Hungary, museums hold a peculiar collection of small bronze objects. They are hollow, geometric forms, 12-sided polyhedra, each face pierced with a circular hole of varying diameter, knobs set at every corner. Most measure just a few inches across. They date to the 2nd or 3rd century CE, the height of the Roman Empire, and yet no ancient writer ever mentions them. No inscription explains their use. To this day, they remain a puzzle cast in bronze, the Roman dodecahedra. The mainstream fact is certain. Dozens have been found, often in fields, sometimes in hoards of coins, and occasionally in Roman military contexts. Archaeologists agree they were manufactured during the imperial period, but beyond that, consensus falters. Their craftsmanship is precise, and they appear in regions across the empire's northern provinces. Yet curiously, none have been found in Italy itself, the empire's heart. Quirky theories abound. Some suggest they were tools for surveying, used to measure distances or angles. Others propose they were candlestick holders, the holes casting patterned light in ritual ceremonies. A particularly colourful idea imagines them as dice for elaborate games, though no rules survive. In recent years, hobbyists have used 3D printed replicas to test whether they could measure the optimal sowing times for grain by sighting the sun through paired holes. A clever agricultural calendar hidden in plain bronze. Fringe enthusiasts, as always, lean further still, declaring them relics of lost technologies or teaching aids from civilizations far older than Rome. Scholars still debate because evidence is frustratingly thin. No written sources explain them, and their contexts of discovery are too varied to provide certainty. Some were found alongside coins, others in rural soils, a few near Roman camps. Were they practical devices, sacred objects, or both? Their absence from Roman literature is especially baffling. An empire that documented roads, aqueducts, recipes, even jokes, yet left no word about these peculiar polyhedra. To hold one is to feel a paradox. Its weight is solid, its symmetry deliberate, its knobs worn smooth by handling. One can imagine a Roman engineer turning it in his hands, or a priest setting it on an altar as light streamed through its holes. Perhaps it was both tool and talisman, an object where science and superstition overlapped. The Roman dodecahedra remind us of how easily the ordinary can become extraordinary once meaning is lost. They are not as grand as the Longyou caves, nor as haunting as Malta's skulls, yet their mystery lies in their simplicity. A handful of bronze toys, or sacred instruments of cosmic alignment? The answer, like so many of history's riddles, remains just out of reach, inviting each generation to see in them whatever pattern their imagination prefers. The Mount Owen claw. In 1986, deep within the cold, damp darkness of a cave in New Zealand's Mount Owen, a team of archaeologists made a discovery that seemed torn from a Gothic novel. As they carefully brushed away centuries of sediment, their lamps revealed a massive clawed hand, mummified, leathery skin still intact, tendons preserved, and curved talons gripping the air as if frozen mid-motion. It was not fossilized stone, but flesh and keratin, eerily lifelike despite the millennia. The mainstream fact is that this claw belonged to a large bird known as the moa, specifically a species called Megalapteryx didinus, which once roamed New Zealand. Moa were flightless giants, some reaching over 3 meters in height until they were hunted to extinction by Polynesian settlers around the 15th century. The Mount Owen specimen, preserved in the cool, dry cave environment, is estimated to be over 3,000 years old, a relic from a vanished ecosystem. Yet the find was so startling that at first even seasoned archaeologists hesitated. Some thought it might be the claw of a dinosaur resurrected from prehistory. Photographs of the discovery quickly circulated, fueling rumours of unknown creatures lurking in New Zealand's remote valleys. Fringe enthusiasts leapt on the idea, weaving tales of living dinosaurs or even cryptid beasts still hiding in the island's wilderness. For locals, it rekindled stories of the puakai, a legendary giant bird said to swoop down and snatch humans away. Scholars still debate the moa's timeline. Did the birds truly vanish centuries ago, or might small populations have survived in remote forests into more recent times? A handful of tantalizing eyewitness accounts from the 19th century describe enormous, feathered creatures glimpsed in the bush. No evidence has ever confirmed these sightings, but the Mount Owen claw, with its almost fresh appearance, lends a strange weight to the possibility. To imagine the living moa is to picture a bird as tall as a man, with powerful legs and a presence that could dominate the landscape. For early Maori hunters, they would have been both a formidable challenge and a vital source of food. The claw, preserved against all odds, is a haunting reminder of how close in time we stand to creatures that feel primeval. Unlike the dinosaurs, erased tens of millions of years ago, the moa vanished within human memory, perhaps within the echoes of oral tradition. When the claw was finally displayed in museums, visitors stared as if at a relic from a myth. It remains one of those artifacts that collapse the distance between past and present, leathery flesh bridging the gap between extinction and imagination. Like the Roman dodecahedra or the Longyou caves, it proves that history still has the power to astonish, to remind us that the world we inherit is not as settled or as well mapped as we sometimes believe. The Sanxingdui civilization. In 1929, a farmer digging a ditch in Sichuan, China, struck something that glittered in the earth. He had stumbled upon fragments of jade and bronze unlike anything known from Chinese history. Decades later, in the 1980s, full-scale excavations at the site of Sanxingdui revealed two vast pits filled with thousands of astonishing artifacts: gold masks, life-sized bronze heads with staring eyes, towering statues, and a great bronze tree with curling branches. Nothing in the record of ancient China had prepared archaeologists for this discovery. The mainstream fact is that the Sanxingdui culture flourished around 1200 BCE, contemporary with the late Shang dynasty, yet its artifacts look utterly distinct, alien even. The bronze faces are elongated, with exaggerated almond-shaped eyes, protruding pupils, and fierce expressions, more reminiscent of surrealist art than of traditional Chinese motifs. The sheer scale of the bronzes is unprecedented. One standing figure rises over 8 feet tall, gripping an object whose identity has been lost. Quirky interpretations soon followed. Some suggested these were depictions of gods or shamans wearing ritual masks, their features magnified for symbolic effect. Others imagined they represented an entirely separate people, with physiologies and aesthetics alien to the rest of China. Fringe enthusiasts went further, pointing to their strange, otherworldly appearance as evidence of contact with extraterrestrials. The great bronze tree, with its spiralling branches and bird perches, has been likened to the Tree of Life, a motif spanning cultures from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica. Scholars still debate the civilization's origins and fate. Why do the artifacts appear so suddenly, with little precedent in earlier Chinese art? And why, after such dazzling achievements, does the culture vanish from the record, leaving few traces beyond these pits of sacrifice? Some propose natural disasters, earthquakes or floods, that shattered the society. Others argue it was absorbed into neighbouring cultures, its uniqueness diluted into the broader tapestry of Chinese civilization. But the abruptness of its rise and fall leaves unsettling gaps. To walk among the Sanxingdui artifacts today is to feel a presence both familiar and alien. Gold masks gleam under museum lights, their features impassive yet uncanny. The bronze figures tower as if guardians of a forgotten ritual, staring with eyes widened as though meant to pierce the veil between worlds. Who stood before them 3,000 years ago, offering incense, chanting prayers? And why did that culture consign these magnificent works to the earth, burying them as though sealing away their own memory? The Sanxingdui discovery reminds us that entire civilizations can bloom, thrive, and disappear, leaving only fragments behind. Like the Mount Owen claw or the Roman dodecahedra, it unsettles the neat timelines we often imagine. It whispers that history still hides peoples and stories as strange as any legend, waiting for a spade to strike the earth and bring them blinking into the light. The Dogu figurines. Across the scattered villages of Japan's Jomon period, stretching from 14,000 to 400 BCE, artisans shaped small clay figurines that continue to puzzle historians. Known as Dogu, these statuettes stand only a few inches tall, but their forms are striking, broad-hipped, wide-eyed, and ornamented with elaborate patterns. Many appear humanoid, yet their eyes bulge like goggles, their bodies encased in what seems almost like armour. Some have been broken deliberately, others buried in ritual contexts. To look at them is to feel both intimacy and enigma, as if these fragile figurines hold stories too strange to tell. The mainstream fact is that over 18,000 Dogu have been discovered across Japan, the majority dating from around 1000 to 400 BCE. They are almost always female in form, with exaggerated hips and bellies, suggesting connections to fertility or childbirth. Archaeologists believe they may have played a role in ritual healing. Some were broken at the limbs, possibly symbolically transferring illness from the living to the clay figure. Yet the quirks of their design resist easy explanation. The so-called goggle-eyed Dogu, with wide circular or almond-shaped eyes, look astonishingly modern, more like science fiction astronauts than prehistoric fertility charms. Their geometric decorations have been interpreted as tattoos, clothing, or even protective suits. A handful of fringe theories insist these are not symbols of fertility at all, but depictions of visitors from beyond the stars, immortalized by a culture that otherwise left little monumental art. Scholars still debate their role in Jomon society. Were they household talismans, offerings buried at sacred sites, or symbolic guardians of women in labour? The fact that so many were intentionally broken suggests a ritual purpose, but the specifics are lost to time. Without written records, each interpretation is a mirror reflecting modern imagination as much as ancient intent. To imagine a Jomon village is to see small huts clustered around a hearth, with artisans carefully shaping clay, etching lines with bone tools, and giving their figures those strange, watchful eyes. Perhaps a sick child was given a Dogu for protection, later broken to carry away the illness. Perhaps a mother held one during birth, whispering prayers for safe passage. Or perhaps, as some romantics suggest, these were charms meant to connect human communities with a world beyond the human. In museums, the Dogu sit behind glass, tiny yet magnetic. Their eyes, impossibly large, seem to follow visitors with silent intensity. They are not as monumental as the Moai of Easter Island, or as imposing as the Sanxingdui bronzes, yet their strangeness carries a different power, the mystery of a people who poured imagination into clay, leaving behind forms that feel at once prehistoric and futuristic. Like the Rongorongo tablets, or Malta's missing skulls, they bridge the gap between ritual and riddle, forever guarding their secret in silence. The underwater Yonaguni ruins. In 1986, a diver exploring the waters off Yonaguni, a small island at Japan's southern edge, noticed something extraordinary rising from the seabed. At a depth of around 20 metres lay massive stone terraces, staircases, and platforms, cut with such precision that they seemed unmistakably man-made. Sharp angles, flat surfaces, and towering monoliths formed what looked like a submerged city. News of the discovery rippled quickly. Had Japan found its own Atlantis beneath the Pacific waves? The mainstream fact is clear. The Yonaguni monument is real, stretching more than 150 metres long and 40 metres wide. Its central structure resembles a stepped pyramid, with ledges that resemble terraces and roads. Geologists agree the site was once above sea level, but the debate is whether humans shaped it, or whether natural geological processes carved it. Japan's tectonic activity and layered sandstone can fracture into rectilinear forms that mimic architecture. Still, the scale and symmetry of Yonaguni seem uncanny. Quirky theories soon flourished. Some divers claimed to see carvings of animals, faces, even writing etched into the rock. Fringe enthusiasts proposed Yonaguni as the remains of Mu, a legendary Pacific continent said to have vanished beneath the sea. Others linked it to ancient maps or even the Piri Reis chart, suggesting forgotten civilizations once mapped coastlines now lost to rising waters. A few enthusiasts even imagine it as evidence of advanced cultures predating known history, their cities swallowed at the end of the last ice age. Scholars still debate the balance of nature and human intervention. Marine geologists emphasize the natural fracturing of sandstone, while some archaeologists argue that terraces and road-like features hint at human modification. Without definitive artifacts, no pottery, no tools, the argument remains unresolved. Could it have been a quarry where stone was cut away, leaving behind accidental geometry, or was it once a ceremonial site, a place where an ancient community gathered before the sea claimed it? To swim over Yonaguni is to feel both exhilaration and unease. Schools of fish weave through stone corridors that look like plazas. Currents swirl through staircases that descend into blue shadow. One can imagine, centuries ago, figures walking those steps, gazing across an island that no longer exists. Or perhaps no one ever stood there at all, and what looks like architecture is simply the artistry of geology. Like the Dogu figurines' strange eyes or the Longyou caves' hollowed chambers, Yonaguni sits on the edge of plausibility. It might be nothing more than nature's trick, or it might be a shattered doorway into a chapter of human history erased by the tides. Either way, it reminds us how fragile the boundary is between myth and stone, and how easily the sea can swallow certainty whole, the quipu knots of the Incas. High in the Andes, the Inca Empire once ruled over millions without a written alphabet. Instead, their administrators relied on something deceptively simple, strings of knotted cords called quipus. Each quipu consisted of a main cord with dozens, sometimes hundreds of smaller strings dangling from it, each tied with knots in varying positions and patterns. To the untrained eye, they look like tangled necklaces or children's crafts. Yet these knots carried the weight of an empire. The mainstream fact is remarkable. Quipus were used for record-keeping across the Inca domains, which stretched over 2,500 miles of mountains and valleys. Spanish chroniclers described officials carrying quipus to record census counts, storehouse inventories, and tribute obligations. Some quipus contained over 1,000 strings, each encoding data in a positional decimal system. Modern studies confirm that the placement of knots corresponds to numbers, an ingenious method of accounting without ink or paper. But beyond the math lies the mystery. A handful of scholars suspect quipus may have conveyed more than numbers. Could they have encoded language, with knots functioning like syllables or words? If so, then thousands of Inca voices remain tied up in cords we can no longer read. Only a fraction of the estimated 25,000 quipus survive today, scattered across museums, and none has been definitively translated. For now, they remain mute, their potential sentences hanging in silence. Quirky theories abound. Some claim quipus were portable libraries of poetry and history erased by Spanish conquest. Others imagine they functioned as mnemonic aids for oral recitation, each knot sparking memory in the storyteller's mind. A few fringe writers push further, suggesting quipus encoded maps, calendars, or even astronomical knowledge, their cords weaving together a fabric of cosmic as well as earthly order. Scholars still debate their true scope. Were quipus purely administrative, the spreadsheets of their time, or did they carry epics, laws, even love songs, in a language now forever lost? Recent studies comparing knot patterns across different quipus have uncovered striking repetitions, hinting at a possible shared vocabulary. If that key could be cracked, quipus might become the Rosetta Stone of the Andes. To picture their use is to imagine an Inca quipu Mayok, the keeper of the knots, sitting in a sunlit plaza, cords draped across his lap. As villagers reported harvests or taxes, his fingers moved deftly, tying new knots with practiced speed. Behind him, the empire's roads stretched over mountains, quipus carried from one region to another, binding the state together with strings instead of scrolls. Like the Rongorongo script of Easter Island or the Phaistos disc of Crete, the quipu teases us with the possibility of a lost language hiding in plain sight. Each knot holds both certainty and ambiguity. We know they count, but do they also speak? Until that question is answered, the quipu remains one of history's most delicate riddles. Chords of memory whose meaning has slipped through human hands. The Saqqara bird. In 1898, amidst the sands of Egypt's vast necropolis at Saqqara, archaeologists uncovered a small wooden object buried within a tomb dating to around 200 BCE. At first glance it seemed like a simple carving of a bird, its wings spread wide. But on closer inspection, the piece revealed oddities. Its wings were straight and tapered, not curved like most avian forms, and its tail resembled a vertical rudder rather than feathers. It looked less like a bird and more like an airplane. The mainstream fact is that the Saqqara bird is a 7-inch sycamore carving, catalogued as part of ancient Egyptian funerary goods. Scholars agree it was likely symbolic, perhaps representing the soul's flight in the afterlife, or an image of Horus, the falcon god. But the unusual design, coupled with its lack of feet, leaves open questions about whether it was purely decorative or meant to serve some other function. Quirky theories seized on those features. In the 1960s, an Egyptian physician named Khalil Messiha argued the object was an ancient glider model, proof that Egyptians had experimented with flight millennia before the Wright brothers. He pointed to the aerodynamic qualities of its wings and tail. Enthusiasts later built scale replicas, some of which glided short distances when launched by hand. Others speculated it was part of a child's toy, a weather vane, or even a ritual tool meant to harness the wind. Scholars still debate its purpose. While mainstream Egyptologists maintain it was likely a stylized bird figure, the question lingers: why design it with such aircraft-like precision? Was it simply artistic coincidence, or did it reflect observational knowledge of aerodynamics that we have overlooked in ancient science? Without inscriptions or parallels, the answer remains elusive. To imagine its ancient context is to picture mourners standing in the dim light of a Saqqara tomb, placing offerings to guide the dead. Alongside amulets, scarabs, and shabti figurines lay this strange wooden bird. Was it a symbol of the soul's upward journey? Or did it embody some practical experiment long forgotten, the fragment of an ancient engineer's dream? The Saqqara bird now sits in a glass case at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, its polished wood glowing softly under museum lights. Visitors lean in close, marvelling at its uncanny resemblance to modern aircraft. Like the quipus of the Andes or the dodecahedra of Rome, it embodies the tantalizing overlap between symbolism and science. A small carving, only a few ounces of wood, continues to lift imagination skyward, reminding us that the ancient world may have dreamed of flight long before we spread wings of steel. The Devil's Bible, Codex Gigas. In a quiet vault in Sweden's National Library rests a medieval manuscript so massive it is known simply as the Codex Gigas, the giant book. Weighing over 160 pounds and stretching nearly 3 feet tall, it is the largest surviving medieval manuscript in the world. Its thick pages of vellum, made from the hides of more than 100 animals, contain the complete Latin Bible alongside medical texts, chronicles, and exorcism spells. But it is not its size alone that makes it famous. Halfway through the volume, one page bears a startling full-colour portrait, a horned, clawed devil crouching within a frame of green, hence its nickname, the Devil's Bible. The mainstream fact is that the Codex Gigas was created in the early 13th century, likely in a Benedictine monastery in Bohemia. Legend tells of a monk who broke his vows and was sentenced to be walled up alive. To escape death, he promised to produce in a single night a book containing all human knowledge. When midnight approached and the task was impossible, he is said to have invoked Satan for aid. In gratitude, he painted the devil's portrait inside the book. Quirky embellishments have followed the manuscript through history. Some say the pages carry curses, bringing misfortune to those who owned it. During the 30 Years' War, it was taken as war booty by Swedish forces, who believed its presence on the battlefield brought them victory. In modern times, paranormal enthusiasts whisper that spending time with the book induces dread or hallucinations. Skeptics point out that these are stories born of its eerie reputation rather than its physical qualities. Scholars still debate certain details. Could one scribe truly have written all 310 parchment leaves? Handwriting analysis suggests a single author, remarkably consistent across hundreds of pages, yet completing it would have required decades of labour, not a single night. The devil's portrait remains an anomaly as it sits alone, unmatched by other illustrations in the manuscript. Was it a reminder of temptation, a warning to monks, or perhaps a personal confession by its creator? To imagine its making is to see a solitary figure bent under candlelight, dipping quill into ink, page after page, year after year. Outside, the abbey bells toll the hours, while inside, a monumental work of devotion or desperation takes shape. Whether or not Satan ever touched its pages, the Codex Gigas remains a monument to human endurance, imagination, and the blurred line between faith and fear. Today, visitors peer at the devil's portrait through glass, struck by its size and strangeness. Like the Saqqara bird's wooden flight or the quipus's knotted codes, the Codex Gigas invites us to wonder not only at what was written, but at what was believed. The devil may or may not have had a hand in its creation, but his shadow lingers, inked forever in the largest book of the Middle Ages. The Voyages of Zheng He. In the early 15th century, when much of Europe still clung to coastal waters, the Ming dynasty launched an astonishing series of expeditions across the seas. At their helm was Admiral Zheng He, a towering figure in every sense, over 6 feet tall, a Muslim eunuch turned naval commander. Between 1405 and 1433, he led 7 voyages that carried enormous fleets of treasure ships to India, Arabia, and the coast of Africa. Some of these ships, described in Ming records, were said to stretch over 120 meters long, far larger than anything Columbus or Magellan would later command. The scale alone seems almost mythic. The mainstream fact is that Zheng He's fleets undeniably reached ports as far as East Africa. His sailors traded silk and porcelain for ivory, spices, and exotic animals. One voyage famously returned with a giraffe, paraded as a mythical killin in the emperor's court. These expeditions projected China's power far across the Indian Ocean, and then, just as suddenly, they ceased. After 1433, the voyages ended, the giant ships were left to rot, and China turned inward. Quirky theories have filled the silence. In the 2000s, a controversial book claimed Zheng He's fleets circumnavigated the globe, reaching America long before Columbus. Maps such as the so-called 1418 chart have been cited as evidence, though many historians consider them forgeries. Fringe writers point to supposed Chinese anchors found in California or tales of wrecked junks in New Zealand. Some enthusiasts argue that the sheer size of the treasure ships suggests ambitions far beyond Africa, though no definitive proof exists. Scholars still debate the motives behind the abrupt end. Was it politics? Confucian officials in Beijing suspicious of maritime adventures? Was it economics, as the court decided the voyages were too costly? Or was it ideology, an empire so confident in its centrality that foreign exploration seemed unnecessary? Whatever the reason, shipbuilding skills and naval charts were deliberately suppressed, leaving only tantalizing gaps in the record. To imagine Zheng He's fleet is to picture a floating city of hundreds of ships, sails billowing, gongs sounding across the ocean. Crowds would have gathered on distant shores to see the vast dragon-prowed vessels looming over their harbours, emissaries disembarking with silks and scrolls. For those who argue that Chinese sailors may have reached the Americas, the image grows even more dramatic. Foreign landscapes first glimpsed from decks that dwarfed European caravels. Today, historians tread carefully between myth and evidence. Zheng He's voyages are an undeniable marvel, but how far they stretched remains uncertain. Like the Devil's Bible with its infernal portrait, or the Saqqara bird with its uncanny aerodynamics, the story of Zheng He walks a tightrope between history and legend. Whether his fleets touched distant continents or not, their memory endures as a reminder of how easily achievements can be lost, how entire oceans of knowledge can vanish when empires choose silence. The Dropa stones, high in the remote Bayan Ha mountains of Tibet, so the story goes, archaeologists in the 1930s stumbled upon a cave filled with skeletal remains, tiny bodies, some barely 4 feet tall, their skulls unusually large. Alongside them lay hundreds of stone discs, each about a foot in diameter, etched with spirals of fine grooves radiating to the edge. These artifacts came to be known as the Dropa stones, and they have since hovered between archaeology and legend. The mainstream fact, however, is murkier. Unlike the Longyou caves or Sanxingdui bronzes, the Dropa stones lack firm provenance. Accounts of their discovery trace back to a handful of sensational mid-20th century newspaper articles. Some describe how Chinese archaeologists brought them to Beijing, where they languished in museum basements before mysteriously vanishing. Yet despite decades of repetition, no verifiable excavation records exist. The stones remain undocumented in any recognized academic archive. Quirky theories nonetheless flourish. According to one version of the tale, the grooves on the discs were microscopic hieroglyphs. When decoded, they allegedly told the story of the Dropa people, spacefarers who crash-landed on Earth 12,000 years ago and intermarried with local tribes. Enthusiasts point to the skeletal remains, small stature and large heads as proof of their extraterrestrial heritage. The story has since become a staple of fringe literature, inspiring books, documentaries, and countless online debates. Scholars still debate whether the Dropa stones ever existed as described. Some suggest they were misidentified grinding stones, common in Himalayan regions, later exaggerated into mystery. Others suspect the entire story was a fabrication, born of Cold War-era fascination with UFOs and lost civilizations. And yet, the persistence of the legend, its details retold in different languages and decades, keeps it alive in popular imagination. To picture the scene as it is told is to enter a shadowy cave, torchlight flickering across stone walls, illuminating neat rows of discs, half buried in dust. One can imagine researchers lifting a disc, running fingers along the fine grooves, wondering if it were a record meant for ears or eyes, not of this world. Outside, the Tibetan winds sweep across barren peaks, as if guarding secrets too old or too strange for easy explanation. The Dropa stones, whether real relics or elaborate myth, embody the allure of mystery itself. They hover at the boundary where history, rumour and science fiction meet. Like the Yonaguni monument beneath the sea or the Devil's Bible with its infernal legend, they force us to ask what we choose to believe when evidence is thin and the unknown beckons. In that way, they are less an archaeological find than a cultural mirror, reflecting humanity's endless hunger for stories that stretch beyond the stars. The Tartaria tablets. In 1961, at a Neolithic site near Tartaria in Romania, archaeologist Nicolae Vlasă uncovered 3 small clay tablets. baked to preserve them by accident, perhaps in the fire of the very settlement they came from. They bore incised markings unlike any other artifacts from prehistoric Europe. The lines resembled pictographs, stylized animals, symbols, and abstract signs, arranged in a manner that looked strikingly similar to early writing systems. Yet the tablets were dated to around 5300 BCE, centuries older than Sumerian cuneiform, which is usually hailed as the world's first script. The mainstream fact is that the Tartaria tablets are genuine artifacts from the Vinča culture, an advanced Neolithic society that thrived in the Balkans. Archaeologists recognize the broader set of markings across Vinča sites as a symbolic tradition, sometimes called the Vinča script. But whether these symbols represent proto-writing or simply ritual decoration remains contested. The Tartaria discovery, with its close resemblance to true writing, reignited debate about the very origins of literacy. Quirky theories sprang up quickly. Some claim the tablets prove that the first civilization arose not in Mesopotamia, but in Old Europe, with the Balkans as its cradle. Fringe writers even linked them to the mythical land of Hyperborea, or to Atlantean survivors spreading knowledge across continents. Others noted their resemblance to symbols found in distant places, on the Indus Valley seals, for instance, and speculated about a global prehistoric language shared before recorded history splintered into isolated scripts. Scholars still debate their status. Were they genuine attempts at writing, encoding names or prayers, or were they purely ritual symbols, perhaps charms buried with a shaman in whose grave they were found? Without longer texts or bilingual translations, the question remains unresolved. Some researchers argue the resemblance to Mesopotamian pictographs is coincidental, while others insist it hints at forgotten cultural contact across early trade routes. To imagine their use is to picture a Neolithic ritual, a figure clad in furs and beads, etching symbols into wet clay, then placing the tablets beside a fire as smoke curled into the air. Perhaps the marks carried names of ancestors, or blessings for fertility, or warnings for unseen spirits. When the settlement burned, the tablets hardened and survived, carrying their strange script into our time. Today, the Tartaria tablets sit quietly in a Romanian museum, their signs no less enigmatic than when first unearthed. Like the quipus of the Andes or the Rongorongo boards of Rapa Nui, they force us to ask where writing truly began, and whether literacy may have sprouted in multiple soils, then withered before history could take root. They are small, almost fragile, yet their implications are vast, clay fragments that whisper of civilizations older and perhaps wiser than we dare to believe. The Hexham heads. In 1971, in the quiet town of Hexham in northern England, two young boys digging in their garden unearthed a pair of strange objects. Roughly hand-sized, carved from stone, they resembled grotesque human heads with exaggerated features, bulging eyes, wide mouths, and an unsettling, almost mischievous expression. The family placed them on the mantelpiece as curiosities. But what followed quickly moved the story from archaeology into folklore. The mainstream fact is that the so-called Hexham heads are real artifacts, though their age and authenticity are disputed. Some specialists have argued they are ancient Celtic carvings, perhaps ritual objects dating back centuries. Others suggest they were crude modern creations, possibly crafted by a local hobbyist and discarded. Laboratory tests have given mixed results, some suggesting stone, others modern cement-like materials. Quirky tales grew almost immediately. Neighbours reported strange happenings, objects moving in the night, sudden chills in rooms, the sensation of being watched. One account tells of a creature, half man, half animal, seen prowling near the garden after the heads were disturbed. Another story claimed the heads could turn slightly on their own, as if alive. The folklore grew so strong that one researcher, who kept the heads for study, allegedly suffered poltergeist-like disturbances in his home until he returned them. Scholars still debate what, if anything, the heads signify. If they were genuine Celtic carvings, they may have been ritual charms meant to ward off spirits or embody ancestral power. Decapitated heads hold a long symbolic place in Celtic tradition, often associated with the soul and supernatural protection. But the lack of clear archaeological context, found in a garden, not an excavation, undermines firm conclusions. Were they ancient relics resurfacing by accident, or a 20th century prank that spiraled into legend? To imagine the Hexham heads in antiquity is to picture a druid or local chieftain holding the stone talismans during ritual, setting them at thresholds as guardians against unseen forces. To imagine them in the 1970s is to see two boys dusting them off, laughing as they carried the strange faces indoors, unaware they were awakening a storm of speculation and superstition. Today, the Hexham heads rest quietly in storage, their whereabouts rarely displayed, yet their legend continues to circulate, feeding paranormal television and folklore collections. Like the Dropa stones of Tibet or the Devil's Bible of Bohemia, they remind us how thin the boundary can be between artifact and haunting. Two carved faces, small enough to fit in a child's hands, have become icons of mystery, watchers whose gaze has lingered across centuries, or perhaps only across a few decades, depending on what we choose to believe. The Ulfbert swords, in museums across Europe, behind glass cases, rest blades that glimmer with a mystery as sharp as their edges. They are the Ulfbert swords, medieval weapons forged between the 9th and 11th centuries, bearing inlaid inscriptions that read +VLFBERH or variations of the name. To the eye, they look like the prized possessions of Viking chieftains and Frankish knights. But when metallurgists examined them, they revealed a secret. These blades were centuries ahead of their time. The mainstream fact is astonishing. The Ulfbert swords were made of crucible steel, containing carbon levels nearly uniform throughout the blade. This produced metal far stronger, purer, and more flexible than ordinary medieval iron. In effect, these swords were the super alloys of their age. Yet such steel, known as Damascus or Wootz steel, was typically produced only in India and Persia. The technology to refine iron at such high temperatures would not appear in Europe again until the Industrial Revolution, nearly 800 years later. Quirky theories swirl around their origin. Some suggest Ulfbert was a single legendary smith, guarding a secret method passed down like a family recipe. Others propose the name functioned as a brand, stamped on blades forged by a guild that monopolized rare steel imports. A few fringe voices imagine even stranger sources, lost knowledge from Rome, remnants of Atlantean metallurgy, or transmissions of technology across forgotten trade routes. Scholars still debate the logistics. How did European smiths obtain such high-quality steel? Was it imported ingots from the east, reforged into blades along the Rhine, or had a few masters stumbled upon techniques their neighbours could not replicate, only for the method to vanish once more into obscurity? Notably, hundreds of Ulfbert swords survive, but only a fraction bear the true crucible steel. Others are inferior imitations, suggesting counterfeiting even in the Middle Ages. To hold one would be to feel a weapon balance between science and myth. Imagine a Viking raider drawing an Ulfbert from its sheath, its edge gleaming sharper and stronger than any blade his enemies carried. In the chaos of battle, such swords may have seemed enchanted, slicing through armour with uncanny ease. Their owners would have guarded them like treasures, not only tools of war but symbols of prestige and power. Today, the Ulfbert swords rest as relics of genius lost. We can test their carbon levels, reconstruct their alloys, even forge replicas with modern furnaces. Yet the precise chain of transmission, the how and why of their creation, remains uncertain. Like the Hexham heads, with their haunting folklore, or the Tartaria tablets with their possible proto-writing, the Ulfbert blades sit at the intersection of fact and enigma. They remind us that technology is not a straight line of progress, but a winding path where brilliance sometimes appears too early, flickers brightly, and then vanishes for centuries. The Temple of Hypogeum sounds. Beneath the streets of Paola, Malta, lies the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, a subterranean complex of chambers carved into limestone around 4000 BCE. Already famed for its scale and age, the site hides a second mystery, its acoustics. In one particular chamber, known today as the Oracle Room, a human voice resonates in extraordinary ways. A single chant or hum within its stone walls can vibrate through the entire underground system, amplifying and deepening into tones that seem almost otherworldly. The mainstream fact is that this phenomenon has been measured by scientists. Frequencies around 110 Hz resonate powerfully within the chamber, producing effects that modern researchers suggest may alter brain activity. Visitors report feeling vibrations in their bones, as though the stone itself were speaking back. Archaeologists believe the acoustics were deliberately engineered, since no other chambers in the Hypogeum resonate in quite the same manner. Quirky interpretations have flourished. Some suggest the Oracle Room was used in ritual ceremonies, where priests' voices would seem amplified beyond human strength, evoking divine authority. Others link it to altered states of consciousness. Imagining initiates entering trances induced by sound alone. Fringe theorists even argue the chamber was designed as an ancient sound technology, a form of prehistoric resonance therapy, or perhaps communication with forces unseen. Scholars still debate whether the resonance was intentional or accidental. Was it a deliberate architectural choice, evidence of advanced knowledge of acoustics long before recorded science? Or was it an accident later incorporated into ritual practice? The chamber's paintings of spirals and red ochre designs suggest symbolic meaning, but without texts, interpretation remains elusive. To picture the scene is to imagine a procession, end descending into darkness, torches flickering against the stone walls. In the Oracle Room, a priest steps forward and begins to chant. His voice, low and steady, swells into a booming vibration that seems to come from everywhere at once. Those gathered feel the sound in their chests, their pulses quickening, their minds drifting into altered states. In that moment, the Hypogeum becomes more than stone. It becomes a living instrument, turning human voices into the roar of the divine. Today, visitors to the site can no longer chant within the chamber. Its fragility demands silence, but recordings capture the uncanny resonance, a reminder that ancient people may have known truths about sound and its effects that we are only rediscovering. Like the Ulfbert sword's lost metallurgy or the Cochno stone's forgotten symbols, the Hypogeum's acoustics remind us that technology is not always about machines. It can also be carved into rock, hidden in echoes, and preserved in mysteries that refuse to fade. The map of Piri Reis. In 1929, while cataloguing the archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, scholars unrolled a fragment of a world map that immediately defied expectations. Drawn on gazelle skin in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, the chart depicted the Atlantic Ocean, complete with detailed coastlines of Europe, Africa and the Americas. But what startled researchers was its southern extension, a landmass resembling Antarctica, drawn not only centuries before the continent's official discovery in 1820, but apparently without the ice sheet that now buries its outline. The mainstream fact is that the Piri Reis map is genuine. Piri himself annotated the parchment, claiming he compiled it from about 20 maps, including ancient Greek and Arabic sources, as well as charts captured from Columbus. Its accuracy in depicting parts of South America is striking, especially considering that the Spanish had barely begun exploring its coasts. Some scholars argue that the map reflects knowledge gleaned from early voyages now forgotten, stitched together by a skilled cartographer working at the height of Ottoman naval power. Quirky theories blossomed. Erich von Däniken and other fringe writers seized on the Antarctica anomaly, suggesting the map was based on ancient surveys made when the continent was ice-free, perhaps over 6,000 years ago. Others proposed that it proves the existence of a lost seafaring civilization capable of global mapping long before Egypt or Sumer, sometimes identified with Atlantis. More imaginative voices hint that such precision required aerial or extraterrestrial perspectives, an ancient satellite's eye etched onto animal skin. Scholars still debate the southern landmass. Many argue it is not Antarctica at all, but a distorted representation of South America extended too far east. Others believe Piri copied elements from earlier maps without fully understanding them, blending myth and fact into a patchwork. Yet even the cautious agree the map's accuracy in certain coastal details is surprisingly advanced for its time. To imagine Piri Reis at work is to picture the admiral unrolling worn charts taken from Spanish ships, cross-referencing them with Arabic portolans, sketching coastlines with a steady hand, while annotating notes in Ottoman Turkish. In his mind, the world was expanding rapidly, its edges filling with new shapes, yet he also reached back into older traditions, compiling knowledge that may itself have descended from long-forgotten sources. Today, the Piri Reis map hangs under protective glass, its ink faded, yet its outlines still distinct. Like the Hypogeum's resonant chamber or the Ulfbert sword's impossible steel, it challenges our assumptions about the flow of knowledge. Was it mere coincidence of distortion, or the echo of a cartographic tradition older than history remembers? The parchment remains mute, a riddle of coastlines that may or may not have existed as drawn, a glimpse of a world both familiar and impossibly ancient. The Sibylline Books. In the heart of early Rome, long before marble forums and imperial splendour, there was a story whispered about a set of mysterious scrolls, the Sibylline Books. According to legend, they were offered to King Tarquinius Superbus in the 6th century BCE by an old woman, the Sibyl of Cumae. She carried 9 prophetic volumes and demanded a staggering price. When Tarquinius scoffed, she burned 3 before his eyes. Still he refused, so she burned 3 more. At last he relented and paid full price for the remaining 3, books said to hold the future of Rome itself. The mainstream fact is that the Sibylline Books, whatever their origin, became central to Roman religion. They were stored in the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill, consulted in times of crisis by a special priestly college. When plague struck, famine loomed, or war threatened, the Senate would turn to the guardians of the books, who would deliver cryptic verses prescribing sacrifices or new rituals to appease the gods. Rome's destiny, it seemed, was intertwined with the words of a vanished prophetess. Quirky tales surround their use. Some claim the books predicted Hannibal's invasion, or the rise of Augustus. Others insist they contained not merely religious instructions, but secret knowledge, including foreign wisdom brought from Greece or the East. A handful of later writers even suggested the Sibylline verses foresaw the coming of Christ, though this interpretation was more pious retrofitting than historical fact. Scholars still debate their true nature. Were they genuine Greek oracles, transplanted into Rome for political prestige? Or were they invented by the Romans themselves, a convenient tool to justify new rites under the cloak of ancient prophecy? What is certain is that the original set was destroyed in 83 BCE, when the Temple of Jupiter burned. Desperate, the Senate Disp atched envoys across the Mediterranean to collect oracles from other shrines, reconstructing a new collection of Sibylline prophecies. But even that version was eventually destroyed by Christian emperors, who feared pagan influence. To picture their consultation is to imagine senators huddled in solemn silence, priests emerging from the temple with verses written on ancient scrolls. Perhaps the words were obscure enough to be interpreted however politics demanded. Yet to a people who believed profoundly in omens, the books must have carried an aura of dread authority. A prophecy uttered in their name could alter the course of the Republic, steering decisions that shaped empires. Today, no line of the Sibylline books survives. Only fragments and second-hand references remain, scattered through Roman historians and Christian apologists. They are a reminder of how fragile prophecy is, revered for centuries, then erased in flames and edicts. Like the Piri Reis map's disputed coastlines, or the Dropa stone's vanishing legends, the Sibylline books sit at the edge of memory, half history, half myth. What they truly said, and whether they ever held the future of Rome, is a mystery Rome itself carried to the grave. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang, in 1974, farmers digging a well in Shaanxi province, China, unearthed fragments of clay that soon revealed one of the greatest archaeological wonders of the modern era, the terracotta army. Thousands of life-sized soldiers, horses and chariots lay buried in ordered ranks, guarding the still-sealed tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. Yet as breathtaking as the army is, it is only the prologue to the greater mystery, what lies inside the emperor's burial chamber, untouched for over 2,000 years. The mainstream fact is that historical records describe Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum in extraordinary detail. Ancient historian Sima Qian wrote that rivers of liquid mercury flowed through the tomb, representing the streams and seas of the empire, while above, a ceiling glittered with stars. Traps were allegedly set to protect the emperor from intruders, and treasures from across his unified realm were entombed alongside him. Modern surveys have confirmed unusually high levels of mercury in the soil, lending eerie support to the old account. Quirky tales abound. Some say the tomb holds vast caches of lost inventions, perhaps even technologies unknown to modern science. Others imagine the emperor preserved in near-perfect form, awaiting some strange rebirth. Fringe writers have speculated about deadly traps, crossbows still cocked, ready to fire on any who enter. The most fantastical visions imagine subterranean palaces, halls lined with jade, or even entire models of the empire, rivers flowing with mercury like molten silver in the dark. Scholars still debate how to proceed. The Chinese government has prohibited excavation of the central chamber, fearing that current technologies cannot prevent damage to its contents. The terracotta army itself was originally painted in vivid colours, but exposure caused the pigments to fade within hours. To open the tomb too soon, experts warn, would risk destroying secrets preserved for millennia, and so the great burial chamber remains sealed, a mystery waiting beneath a mound of earth. To imagine what lies inside is to picture a subterranean world crafted by thousands of labourers under imperial command. Torches would have flickered as artisans inlaid gems in ceilings, engineers poured mercury into channels, and guards sealed corridors with deadly traps. Above them, the emperor's mound rose higher, a mountain of earth concealing a palace of eternity. Did they believe Qin Shi Huang would rule forever in death as he did in life? Or was the grandeur meant to awe future ages, a final proclamation of imperial power? Today, visitors walk among the terracotta warriors, each face unique, each soldier frozen in eternal vigil. Yet beyond their silent ranks lies the greater enigma, the unopened heart of the mausoleum. Like the Sibylline books, lost to fire, or the hypogeum's haunting acoustics carved in stone, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang guards its secrets with stubborn silence. Perhaps one day technology will allow us to open it safely. Until then, it remains one of history's most tantalizing unopened chapters, a story still sealed in earth and time. And so, from forgotten scripts to unopened tombs, these mysteries remain unsolved, reminders that the past still whispers secrets we may never fully decode. Perhaps one day, science will unravel them, Perhaps not, but their power lies in the wonder they spark within us. If you've enjoyed this journey into the unknown, let us know which mystery fascinated you most in the comments below. Your thoughts and theories are part of the story too, and if you'd like to continue exploring the hidden corners of history with us, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, so you won't miss the next chapter in our search for answers that may never come